60 years ago this month, America changed forever. The face of America changed forever. That's when President Lyndon Johnson went to the Statue of Liberty to sign an immigration reform bill that would change the face and the character of America. Because changing the face and the character of America was its intent. It was even the bipartisan consensus in America until about January 20th of this year when Donald Trump took office for the second time. But what if I told you immigration reform was built on a foundation of lies? What if I told you that the supposed blessings of immigration, the economic miracle that came with third world immigrants, was a justification made after the fact? What if I told you that LBJ sang a very different tune when he signed the bill into law? One piece of business before we get started. This episode, I was blessed. This episode is sponsored by a great friend who believes in my work. And right now I'm looking for others to join that number. Maybe even you. This podcast is completely independent. I think of the topics, do the research myself, produce it myself, and even press the publish button onto Spotify and YouTube and Substack and X. I think we're even on Apple Podcasts these days. Now it's time for me to do what I do best. Entertain and inform. And something else we're not here for a long time, we're here for a good time. So let's get rolling. If you've been to Dearborn anytime soon, anytime in the last 20 years, you know exactly what I'm talking about with America being a nation of strangers. If you come away from these series of podcasts only knowing one thing that you don't know now, you need to know that immigration reform and immigration policy is done to us as Americans and not for us. LBJ admitted as much himself. If you're deep in these Twitter streets, and by the way, follow me on X at Down I-75, you know what I'm talking about. You know that the immigration reform law I'm talking about is the Hart-Celler Act of 1965. The seller in the bill is a congressman named Manny Seller of New York. No state is as associated and affiliated with immigration as New York, so his participation makes perfect sense. The heart in the bill you know as a Michigander, even if you don't know that you know him. Have you seen this man over my shoulder? Let me give you a hint. Have you ever gone to Hart Plaza in downtown Detroit? You ever noticed that it's spelled like Hart the name and not the heart inside your chest? The man I'm talking about is the late Michigan Senator Phil Hart. Hart Plaza is named after him. If you've been to Washington, the Hart Senate Office Building is also named for Phil Hart. Phil Hart only lived 64 years on this earth, but his impact and the impact of the bill he championed will far outlast that time span. But on the day LBJ signed Phil Hart's bill, he didn't even mention the senator's name. And isn't that always the way for Michigan politicians? Always the bridesmaid, never the bride? Well, over these next several episodes, I'll make sure Senator Hart gets every bit of the credit and the recognition he deserves for making the modern America, for making America a nation of strangers. For decades now, we've been told about the blessings of immigration. We've been made to think we could hardly eat a taco or cut a lawn or even survive without millions upon millions of foreigners coming in waves, legal and illegal. We've been told that our supplies of birria tacos and hummus would run dangerously low without them. What if I told you it was all a lie? Better yet, I'll let LBJ tell you. Right here, I'm quoting LBJ on the day he signed Hart-Celler. Quote, "This bill that we will sign today is not a revolutionary bill. It does not affect the lives of millions. It will not reshape the structure of our daily lives or really add importantly to our wealth or our power." So everything LBJ just said there was a lie. Hart-Celler was revolutionary. That was its intent. The law actually did affect millions of lives. That was its intent. To not just import people from the third world, but their entire families, while capping legal immigration from within our own hemisphere. If you wonder why Mexico has become something closer to an adversary state than just a neighbor in the last 6 decades, that's why. It won't reshape the structure of our daily lives? Try selling that one in Dearborn, where calls to Islamic prayer play over the loudspeakers in town. But they never get noise violations because Muslims run the city, and they run it as a Muslim city and not as an American one. Just on its face, the idea that changing the law wouldn't change our lives doesn't really make sense. When you import third world people and their third world family members, and those people import their customs, and there is no Hull House, there is no push for assimilation, radical change is exactly what you're going to get. LBJ traveled from Washington, D.C. to Ellis Island to the Statue of Liberty in New York City because it was so important to sign this bill. But when he gets there and the cameras are rolling and the microphones are on, he tries to minimize the impact of that bill. The contrast of those two things should tell you that something's missing, that somebody's lying. As a young reporter, a mentor once told me that when words and deeds are in conflict, trust the deeds and disregard the words. And that's what I'm going to do here. Finally, LBJ says that immigration reform will not add either to our wealth or our power as a country. And this is the first thing LBJ said that was honest. This time it's not LBJ who was lying. It's the fanboys in our news media. It's people at Cato Institution and institutions just like it. It's the Republicans in Congress. At one point, it was Ronald Reagan, God rest his soul. For decades, they've told us about the blessings of immigration. They told us that America would collapse without the sons of the third world. Well, it turns out they're the ones who were lying. The economic miracle was an after-the-fact justification. It was never rooted in reality. LBJ said himself the purpose of the bill is fairness, not to make America richer. But the cleanup crew told us for decades about these miracles that would come from street food vendors, lawn care workers, and IT guys from India. And the worst part of it is that too many of us believe it. So no, LBJ didn't mention Phil Hart by name that day, but he did thank his predecessor, JFK. You might have warm feelings in your heart for JFK, and I do too. But JFK deserves blame for promoting a false narrative. JFK wrote a book saying that America is a nation of immigrants. So when LBJ says that America was built by a nation of strangers, he's just expanding on the JFK frame. So the bill LBJ signed on October 3rd, 1965 was immigration reform. Reform from what? Well, from the 1920s until Hart-Celler was signed, America had an immigration formula. Here's what LBJ had to say about that old system. Under that system, the ability of new immigrants to come to America depended upon the country of their birth. Only 3 countries were allowed to supply 70% of all the immigrants. And if you've been listening closely, your ear should be tingling right now. Your ear should be saying, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense with what I just heard. If 3 countries supplied 70% of the immigrants, when exactly was America built by a nation of strangers? What LBJ described as the solution is chain migration. Put simply, one guy comes, then the whole family gets to follow. This is supposed to be some kind of slick workaround. So you don't need to import millions of people if the people you do import all bring 3, 5, 10, 20 people with them. So it's interesting that as LBJ was signing laws to unite third world immigrants with their families, he was also signing laws and pushing policies that blew up the black American family, like the rule that a family on welfare could not have a man in the house. For black people especially, replacement is not a theory. It's reality. The rise of the third world immigrant has come at our direct expense as a community. But that's a topic for a future podcast, and I promise I'm going to hit that one hard. So LBJ, the Great Society, played a major role in why Detroit looks like Detroit, why Dearborn looks like Dearborn, and why both of them look like a horror show to the average Michigander. The purpose of a system is what it does. The purpose of LBJ's immigration reform was to replace Americans, black and white, with third world immigrants. This was change for the sake of change. There was and there is No economic miracle. LBJ was right about that much. These people cost us money, and they're still flowing in every single year. Here's how the U.S. House history page describes the chain migration that owes to Hart-Celler. Policymakers vastly underestimated the number of immigrants who would take advantage of the family reunification clause. In particular, the law created new opportunities for Asian immigrants to join relatives in America. Following Hart-Celler, annual immigration jumped to nearly 500,000 people, and only 20% came from Europe. So if you've ever wondered why communities like Troy or Novi became so Indian in such a short time, this is why. Black people in America continue to believe that there will be reparations for slavery. Detroit, our largest city in Michigan, even made a reparations task force. So here you have a broke black city talking about reparations. First of all, with what money? Okay, let's say, and let's forget the money. Let's say a big bag of money arrives tomorrow. They come every few years when there's a new stimulus plan. Exactly who should be given reparations for exactly what? Slavery? Michigan was never a slave state. For something that doesn't affect anyone who is as old as I am, and I'm 41, we're so illiterate of history that we don't even know as black people what we need reparations for. 90 years after slavery, the black family was strong. The black business community was strong because it had to be. It's when we bowed at the altar of integration. It's when we traded the black dad for Uncle Sam's welfare check that things went haywire. The destruction of the black family has more to do with our outcomes than slavery did. Both were carried out by Democrats, yet black people are so brainwashed into believing that to be black is to be Democrat. In 2020, Joe Biden even told a radio host that you ain't black if you need to be convinced to vote Democrat. So yeah, vote for the people who enslaved your family. Vote for the people who broke up your family, or you ain't black. Donald Trump didn't break up your family. LBJ did, all while keeping the families of third world immigrants intact. And so, as the great Bodie Broadus said on The Wire, if you want to cry about something, cry over that. Here's a preview of what you can expect in this series, which I'm calling Nation of Strangers. First, we're going to talk about how Ronald Reagan believed in immigrant exceptionalism. I know a lot of you boomers out there love St. Ronald Reagan, and I'm so sorry to tell you, Ronald Reagan was a big part of our problem when it comes to immigration, and it's not just with immigration reform. I'm going to make sure he gets all the credit he deserves for that. Then I'm going to talk about the two white guys who made Dearborn an Arab city. See, a Democrat like Phil Hart was only half the problem in Dearborn, and LBJ deserves a chunk of credit too, but it took a Republican mayor to do the rest. To the extent the Republican brand in Michigan is affiliated with racism and not with freeing the slaves and not with anti-communism, that all traces back to that mayor, the late Orville Hubbard. Then I'm going to talk about how we've become great replacement weary. Did you know that Hart-Celler also led to the rise of illegal immigration? By putting a cap on how many people could come from Mexico, it incentivized illegal immigration by cutting off legal pathways. Not smart. Part two of Great Replacement Weary is going to consider the rise of abortion and the destruction of the black family. While LBJ was signing laws that kept foreign families together, he was pushing policies that tore the black family apart. This was all done by design, by presidents you know, with legacies you respect. These are the dominoes that fell as the ruling class in Washington, Democrat and Republican, embraced the idea of replacement. So don't ever let anyone tell you that replacement is just a theory, or especially that it's a conspiracy theory. We live it every single day. If you take away one thing from this whole series, this Nation of Strangers, what you should know is that immigration policy and immigration reform was done to us as Americans and not done for us.